The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Training Employees Remotely, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Amanda Ramatar and I will be your moderator today, and I'll also be monitoring questions you may have during this session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio. Your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of upcoming webinars covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan website. In addition, we offer the mandatory preventing harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Training Employees Remotely. Our presenter today is Nicole Osborne. Nicole Osborne, MBA, SPHR, is the owner of Synergize HR Consulting. As a private consultant, she works with small to mid-sized businesses and local government as a strategic partner in matters of performance management, training and development, leave management, Americans with Disabilities Act, interactive process, equal employment opportunities, and safety. In addition, she works with individuals as a job coach and expert resume writer. Throughout her career, she has provided strategic direction, thought leadership, and championed the development of initiatives to recognize and retain top talent. Thank you for being with us today, Nicole.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our presentation on training employees virtually. This is something that has become even more important now thanks to the pandemic. So we'll be going through this presentation today and, of course, answer any questions that you may have. So our agenda looks a little like this. We're going to talk about what virtual training is. We're going to talk about taking inventory of your current training programs, how to develop content for virtual training, how to address distractions and involving participants, a couple of tips and tricks to help with your training development, and we'll talk about post-training evaluation. So before we get started, I have a question for you all. Due to the pandemic and the shift to remote work, we've been making adjustments to our training program. Either A, we've purchased access to online training programs. B, we've adapted our in-house training to be conducted online. C, our employee training efforts have been stalled because we have not been able to successfully pivot online. Or D, we've been successful moving in-person functions such as onboarding to online and regularly conduct training in a virtual environment. Please select the answer that most represents what your current state is.
I usually like to wait until we get to about 70% completion, so I'll let you know when we get there. We're at about 55% right now, so Awesome, we're at 70%, so I'm going to close it and show the results. Nicole, you there?
I'm here. I can't see the poll.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought that you had a view of that. So I'll share the results. So we've got 7% have purchased access to online training programs. 50% have adapted their in-home training to be conducted online. 14% employee training efforts have stalled, and 29% have been successful in moving training to a virtual environment.
Great. Well, that makes sense. We're a little bit farther along in the pandemic than we were this time last year. So it's great that a lot of you are taking action to help keep training moving forward in this new environment that we're all adjusting to still today in 2022. The business case for e-learning has been around for quite a while. According to a Brandon Hall study, learning virtually typically requires 40 to 60% less employee time because it can be asynchronous and wherever the employee needs it. It is important to note that saving time doesn't affect learning quality. The Research Institute of America found that e-learning increases retention rates 25 to 60%, while retention rates of traditional training are very low in comparison. This is because employees have more control of the learning process, as well as the opportunity to revisit the training as needed. After implementing an e-learning program in their company, IBM found that participants learned nearly 5 times more material without increasing time spent in training. By teaching more material in a shorter amount of time, companies are able to reduce the time employees spend on training, thus allowing them to get back to work faster, which in turn translates into reduced costs. IBM saved approximately $200 million after switching to e-learning. With online training, companies can reduce costs related to travel, hotel rentals, equipment, and instructors, just to name a few. Industry leaders like IBM have realized the business value of training. In its report, IBM noted that companies that increase team skills meet their objectives 90% more often. The more people you train, the better off you'll be. In the best performing companies, 84% of employees are receiving the training they need, compared to the worst performing companies where only 16% receive sufficient training. Virtual training goes beyond e-learning to broaden the availability and accessibility of person-to-person training, allowing you to create a culture where continued learning is part of the process. By providing highly accessible training into your work environment and encouraging employees to enroll, you enable your teams to learn the techniques and technologies they need to be more productive in their jobs, which will improve both employee morale and retention. The transition to remote work continues to have an undeniable effect on the ability to deliver training to employees who are suddenly now working from home. Now, to some degree, training shifted to online before the pandemic because of the benefits being self-paced and accessible anytime, anywhere. However, some training that was once face-to-face now has to be delivered online, which blindsided everyone involved in the delivery of in-person learning experiences, including organizational development professionals, instructional designers, and course developers, not to mention subject matter experts, instructors, and learners who were not used to training delivery online. Organizations of all sizes have swiftly found themselves having to transfer and deliver what was once live in-person instructor-led training seemingly overnight to online formats. Before getting into the details of virtual training, it may be beneficial to explain what virtual training actually is. It is a training method in which a virtual environment is used by a trainer coach to show, explain, and teach certain skills in order to help others learn. Virtual training, or virtual instructor-led training, essentially takes the fundamentals of person-to-person training and replicates the experience but through a virtual platform such as Microsoft Teams or Zoom. The trainer and their participants log into the chosen platform, much like you did today, from various independent locations. The workshop is live, so all the learners participate at the same time with one another. Virtual workshops are super interactive. There is the opportunity for participants to join in with discussions, share their experiences, practice skills and conversations, and ask questions. Simply, great virtual workshops should be an interactive conversation, not just a presentation. Typically, virtual workshops are bite-sized, running from 60 to 180 minutes, and are sometimes combined with other methods of training such as e-learning or webinars to create a blended learning program. Virtual training is any form of instruction carried out in a virtual or simulated environment when the teacher and student are in different locations. Virtual training environments simulate classroom training experiences. Virtual training solutions allow you to benefit from real-time, online, instructor-led training from the convenience of your home or office. Though virtual training can lower the travel time and cost of getting to an education facility, get consistent, high-quality training for your whole team no matter where they are located, and get the same level of instruction and classes offered when you take a classroom training course. Unlike self-paced online IT courses, virtual training with a highly qualified instructor is essentially the same as being in the room. These courses are technology-enabled, instructor-led offerings that include full student participation, no matter where that student is sitting. In the virtual classroom, online students feel the same level of engagement, get equal attention, and achieve the same learning objectives as those in the room. Virtual training can be particularly useful for new employee orientations, onboarding, and training courses that are usually conducted in person. So how do we pivot our traditional classroom-based trainings to online? That's what we will cover today. If you determine your organization needs a virtual training platform, I'll provide you with some links to options at the end of this training. What makes a course strategic, according to trainingindustry.com, is the overall impact to achieve the important strategic goals and objectives of the organization. Given the number of resources it takes to move to a virtual environment, it is important to take inventory and focus your efforts on the most important and critical courses. If a course won't move the needle on business strategy, don't spend your limited time and resources converting it to a virtual format right now. If you're unsure about impact, go back to the original documentation for the original in-person training if it exists, or ask the facilitator or department managers about the critical need of the training. It may simply be better to wait on these types of trainings until it can be delivered in its original method, which was live in a classroom when people are allowed to return to the office and in-person training can resume safely. Due to your employees' varying degrees of technological ability, you may need training to access your virtual training environment. The technical aspects of a course may seem intuitive to some, but not to others. And for everyone to benefit from the training, you have to make sure that there's some sort of technical training or tutorial available prior to the launch of this training program. If you have paid a vendor to provide your virtual training delivery platform, turn to them for assistance with training documentation and guidance. After all, you're paying for the service. In the last few months, with the surge in demand for online meetings and presentations, communication and collaboration providers have boosted support. Indeed, simply Googling an issue or error message may lead you to the exact page or whatever your learners may need. Further, there may be a quick start guide which you can share with your learners, or if additional issues arise, simply direct them to the vendor support channels. Finding the right training solutions for your company requires balance. Your teams need the latest information on changing technology to be productive, yet the need to continue to perform the work your company does never ends. Sending your staff to training can mean short-term delays in your company's schedules for employees, but the alternative could be even more costly. Without ongoing training, team performance, employee engagement, and retention declines. So if you're not familiar with the ADDIE model of instructional design, it says follows: the analysis, understanding the needs, and then what gaps you need to fill. The design, which is based on your analysis, and it makes the decisions to design the best possible training for your employees. The development is where you bring your learning experience to life. Implementation, as you know, is distributing your learning program, and then your evaluation. So you always need to begin with the end in mind. You won't know if your training program is effective if you don't have your evaluation component baked into the design of your training. So I'd like to know, based on what you've been doing currently, what are some of the tools you've been using for online training? A, virtual breakout rooms, B, polls, C, none, or D, multiple tools.
So Nicole, just so you know, we did have a question come in. I was wondering if maybe you wanted to address it while we're doing the poll. Awesome. So someone wanted to know basically what the negatives were with regard to the e-learning. And basically you had shared a lot of positives. So I think they were just wondering if you had any, insight on what some of the negatives might be.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of those downfalls and twists and turns and how to address them over the next few slides, so that may answer some of your questions. But primarily, some of the downsides are not having people pay attention or not knowing if they're engaged. That's why we need to bake in as many things as we can to keep them moving through the curriculum and then measure that learning. And of course, having the managers follow up when the employees return from the training, so that transfer of learning applies to the job that they're actually going to be doing and what they're using those skills for.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so you got about 70%, so I'm going to close the poll and share it. And it looks like we have 15% use a virtual breakout room, 0% use polls, 49% use none, and 37% use multiple tools.
Okay, great. So as you can see, these polls are a great way to break up some of the content and get feedback from your learners. So it's something that's very easy to do, and most training platforms allow for it. There's also other tools that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes. So you may consider trying to employ some of these different resources to help keep your learners engaged. Okay, so we're going to talk about developing engaging content. So design is important for any trainer regardless of the delivery mode. However, it is particularly critical for virtual training. Less really is more when it comes to designing slides, and the right visual metaphor will always trump a page of text for engaging learners. Consider how the participants will have access to resources such as PowerPoints and handouts. It's not conducive to the training environment to have attendees clicking between windows during the presentation. A snapshot of information is preferred to a detailed resource, which can be emailed after the session. Where bandwidth is an issue, the trainer could look for alternatives to use of webcams and long video clips. Text chat, collaborative whiteboarding, and fun memes are good options. Reducing the resolution of images will also help in decreasing lag time problems. The slide deck that worked in the classroom may not necessarily work in a live training. Oddly enough, to make the presentation more interesting and engaging, a presenter needs more slides, not less. The rule of thumb is 1 minute per slide with visually stimulating graphics and 1 to 2 clear messages on each slide to make the content memorable. As important messages or content may not necessarily make it onto a slide, the presenter or learning team may need to develop additional supplemental material with additional messaging available for download after the presentation. Don't worry about fancy transitions or animations. Learners are more interested in valuable, compelling content than words that dance around the screen. Plus, when you're operating a PowerPoint while presenting online, it's difficult to navigate all the extra transitions. The principles of andragogy, how adults learn, as articulated by Knowles, which is a study that was done in 1984, suggests that adult learners learn best when they're involved in diagnosing, planning, implementing, and evaluating their own learning. In other words, adult learners need to know why they need to know something before undertaking to learn it. They need to be responsible for their own decisions and be treated as capable of self-direction. Have a variety of life experiences which represent the richest resource for learning. Are ready to learn those things they need to know in order to cope effectively with real life situations. Are motivated to learn when they perceive that it will help them perform tasks that they confront in real life situations. In adult learning, the role of the trainer is less about conveying knowledge and information and more about creating and maintaining a supportive climate that promotes the conditions necessary for learning to take place. So with an increased emphasis on process rather than content, in such settings, I lost my words there. Experiential learning methods like case studies, role play, participant presentations, and group tasks such as problem solving are regarded as particularly useful. For learners who tune in early, there could be exercises, polls, or word puzzles programmed on a loop. This will help prepare them mentally for the content to follow and sets the stage for later involvement and interaction. Additionally, the facilitator could lead some technical checks like sound volume and clarity in order to reduce problems that present during the presentation. You can consider playing music also to connect with your audience. This sort of interaction helps learners stay online and engage with the topic until the session actually starts, instead of straying away to go check email and Facebook. Email the participants before the training and ask them to prepare for a quick introduction, such as their name, job title, and an answer to a pre-designated question, such as their favorite book or movie. One of the lessons I learned in the last year was that participants don't know they are going to be asked to share. They end up sharing too much. And if you have 30 attendants and they each take 30 to 60 seconds to introduce themselves, you're going to end up spending up to an hour and a half with introductions. I had built my training plan on a 5-minute introduction for the VP of HR, and unbeknownst to me, she ended up asking the participants to introduce themselves, which gobbled up precious time during an already packed day-long new employee orientation. If the training attendees aren't new and you're reasonably certain that they know the others in the group, you may consider just deleting this exercise completely to focus on the learning. For new users, links to short YouTube videos on how to use the platform, like WebEx, GoTo, or Zoom, could be sent to the learners in advance. That way they will come prepared, and it will reduce the number of frantic emails you get right before or as the training starts. Finally, those pre-session moments can be a useful time for the trainer to connect with their group by sharing some information about themselves and their team. All right, so this should start the part where you have the questions about the downside to online training. So I've got another question for you all. What have you experienced during your virtual learning or meetings since we've moved online? A, kids interruptions. B, pets. C, deliveries or outside noise. Or D, you name it, all of the above or something different.
I know I can vouch for the kids one. When that daycare closes down.
I think that you're in good company. I have been interrupted by my kid, my cats, the trash truck coming by, deliveries, you name it.
Neighbors' dogs.
Exactly.
Perfect. We've got 76%. So I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to share the results. All right, so we have 7% kids, 9% pets, 14% deliveries or outside noise, and 70% you name it, all the above. They're all in the same boat, I suppose.
I am not surprised. As time has gone on, more and more of us have had to encounter these distractions. So how do you combat them during online training? Okay, so we ask learners to turn off email, phones, and limit other distractions, but sometimes fail to follow those guidelines ourselves. As trainers, we need to show respect to our participants and ensure that we are fully focused on them. It is too easy to sneak a peek at messages and lose focus. All of a sudden, you see that important text message about work, and your mind runs away from the task at hand. This could be something new for presenters or facilitators not used to leading webinars or virtual presentations. There are literally moving parts during virtual training, requiring a team to do it all. The instructor may be the one speaking, but perhaps someone else is advancing the slides, and yet someone else is responding to comments and collecting questions as they arrive on the platform. There may be multiple speakers, each with his or her own slide deck. This is a lot to manage. The training is, of course, internal, so there may be a level of understanding in the event of technical difficulties. However, a focus on engagement and effectiveness, strong control of the platform, presentation, and communications channels is key during your session. Earlier this year, I was conducting an interactive session for EEO and diversity in front of a new audience I had never met before. I was in my master bedroom, as it is the only door that has a lock besides the bathroom, and guess what I forgot to lock? I'm right in front of my audience speaking when my 8-year-old kid burst in complaining of a stomach ache. I was successful and able to hold her back with my arm so she didn't get through the virtual background. However, everyone heard about her tummy trouble. I acknowledged the disruption and continued. It happens. Another good one was when I was not used to using a virtual background and my cat pushed open the laundry door behind me and began to use the litter box behind me. Amazon deliveries, construction noise, kids and pets. It's all part of the adventure, and we are all going to experience these things at one time or another. So one thing you can do is involve the participants early and often. When there isn't training face-to-face, the trainer is competing for attention with everything else that's going on around the I'm sorry, I lost my track here because all of a sudden I think that slide doesn't have anything on it, so I apologize. But you can use tools such as show of hands, text chat, online breakout rooms, shared whiteboard is another great feature of virtual training, and that's the ability to use breakout rooms and assign a facilitator to each room. You can assign questions to each room and ask them to discuss in their small group of 4 to 5 people. Take it even further, you can use an online dry erase board such as Awe app, draw.chat, or share the board. So polls, quizzes, photo shares, stretch breaks. Without frequent interaction during the online training, however, learners will tune out. By the way, some of the platforms have a way for the administrator or speaker or panelist to determine who is watching and who is idle. Uh-oh. Then you get busted. As it would happen in an in-person learning environment, there should always be an icebreaker. A short trivia, quiz, or funny anecdote may work well. All the major virtual platforms have multiple methods to keep learners interacting with the presenter, content, and with each other. Learners can raise their virtual hands, send messages in chat, and submit questions. More engagement equals more learning. If the platform does not have certain engagement features, such as polling, find a third-party app to introduce into the training. Most are web-based anyway, requiring the presenter to simply launch a browser window. On the flip side, there may be too much engagement, such as too many unnecessary comments sent by audience members. As such, you may wish to turn off these features and consider if you consider them distracting and unnecessary. Learners are aware that sitting at home and participating in the training is different from sitting in a real classroom. If the training is something that employees are used to, perhaps even something that they look forward to, then finding even more ways to engage and capture their attention online is critical to the success of the training. So, as presented earlier this year on LinkedIn, I bring you 9 steps to planning an effective training. Number one is logging in 15 to 20 minutes before the session starts. Will give you time to test your audio and acquaint yourself with how the platform tools look and feel. If you're presenting with more than one person, check that there isn't unnecessary feedback coming from the microphones. This includes those that may be on a panel and remotely connecting. Number two, invest in reliable technology. Make sure you are on a reliable and stable platform. So Zoom in the beginning of the pandemic was on the receiving end of bad reviews, not because their technology didn't work, but because so many people didn't understand it. There was also a hard time during the summer of the first year of the pandemic where there was a bug preventing videos from being heard. I experienced this issue myself, and the best thing I could do at the time was to describe the video content and then send the link out after the training. But you have to be ready for these types of technical issues. They do happen. Decide between delivering a webinar or a virtual training program. If you're planning on showing slides and talking over them like I'm doing here today, you can record it so that employees can watch it at a flexible time, lower your logistical planning requirements, don't have to worry if people have left the virtual classroom software downloaded, and then you'll have no concerns about time zone issues, and it's still trackable in the learning management system. If your program has specific learning objectives which need application, then the virtual training platform is the way to go. That way you can interact. Prepare for technical difficulties. If it's not a if thing, it's a when thing. Sometimes there's stuff that comes up that you just can't control. But spend time focusing on eliminating the most common technical errors by rehearsing the content, having your tech support contacts handy, and preparing the participants ahead of time so that you know how to test your system and what to do if something breaks. Invest in great sound. Even with the best visual virtual platform, sound can be an issue. If you invest in a hands-free headset or a microphone, it will improve your audio and training delivery. Build a communication plan. Remember, not everyone is comfortable in a virtual training environment. To create a positive learning environment, go through these steps to create an outstanding plan. Part one, communicate expectations. Create interest in the session via emails, through designated training newsletters, or through training department landing page. Your emails should inform the participants about the session, information about login, time, and build excitement. Think marketing, because that's what it is. Part two is to create nudge communication. Each nudge after the original email that includes something for the participants to get excited about. Create a sizzle video or testimonials to talk about the training. You want people to believe that yours will not be the typical zombie-inducing webinar with all the talk and no learning. Include handouts or other downloadables to build curiosity. Open a poll or survey and allow participants to ask questions before the training starts. Include a screenshot of the virtual learning platform with instructions as how to use some of the functions. That way, that eliminates some of the intimidation about going onto the training online. And then your part three is, even though the virtual training has painted the broad strokes for the participant, the trainer still needs to promote reinforcement and support the learning transfer. As a tip, send out a transcript of the questions and answers post-training, as well as copies of any additional reading or resources that were discussed online. Providing a link to the recording also will help enable participants to revisit and learn key messages and concepts that they heard during the first presentation. We all know a facilitator can breathe life into a bad training session, and this is especially true with virtual learning content. In the virtual learning world, the facilitator is the person who not only has to ensure the exchange of knowledge, but also needs to grab and hold the attention of participants, encourage getting tongue-tied again, encourage participation and keep motivation high. This is a very specific skill requirement that is not in everyone's wheelhouse. Even experienced face-to-face facilitators struggle with the virtual arena. If your facilitator is dull and boring, They will not be able to save your virtual training program, and you will have virtual zombies. This may mean putting a different facilitator in place for the virtual program, and then if need be, have them partner with a subject matter expert to bring credibility to the program. A great learning experience will always have two facilitators, one who is the designated facilitator and the other who is the producer. This is for several practical reasons. For instance, while one is speaking or leading, the other can monitor the chat, address questions that may arise, or handle any technical or sound issues that come up. This allows the facilitator to do what they do best, facilitate the training. Even if your facilitators are already experienced with virtual learning sessions and content, it's still important to develop information to help moderate the classroom. The guide should also include the standard learning outcomes of the training and content talking points, but also when and how to insert fun activities into the virtual space. Feedback for classes is normal. Here we need to focus on making your next virtual learning session better than the last. Select a polling software. There are several survey tools online that allow for interactive surveys. We have SurveyMonkey, Poll Wherever, Poll Daddy, or even creating an SMS text survey can allow participants to give you formative data before and after the session. A pre-session poll is a great way to get attendees engaged right off the bat. Ask them about their expectations and goals for the training. Try not to schedule sessions that go longer than 1.5 hours. For a virtual session, ensure that you go through all the material to cover and only add pieces that would be best suited for a trainer-led virtual session. Don't go any longer than 90 minutes without a break. 75 minutes is ideal. Tell your attendees when to expect a break so they can plan ahead. Include slides that tell the participant that it is break time and how long that will last. Consider putting on some music to entertain your participants or show a slideshow of interesting pictures. So we've talked a lot about resources, and I wanted to provide you all with a slide of some of these things that I've mentioned throughout this training. So for the virtual training programs that we discussed, we have WebEx, Adobe Connect, ClickMeeting, and GoTo. There's the webinar software, your online whiteboards that you can incorporate into your breakout sessions so people can doodle or take notes about what they're going to be discussing with the larger group. And then, of course, you have your polling software like we use today, which was built right into our platform. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the audience and answer any questions that you may have.
I think at this point we actually had just the one regarding the negatives. I haven't seen any other questions come through just yet, so I guess everybody must have been enjoying the content. So then I can probably wrap it up. So I just wanted to thank everybody for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. And we will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. Thank you again, Nicole Osborne, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of time. Please be sure to join us on February 15th for employment law update. And thank you to everyone and have a safe day.
Thank you all.